Liam returned home later than usual, weary from another long day at work. The house was quiet, the only sound being the faint ticking of the clock in their bedroom. Jessica was already in bed, scrolling through her phone, her body turned away from his side of the mattress. Liam slipped into the room, careful not to startle her, and changed into a t-shirt and boxers before sliding under the covers. He tried to reach for her, gently placing a hand on her waist. She stiffened immediately. "Not tonight, Liam," she muttered without turning. He paused, hand hovering. "It's been weeks, Jess. Can we just be close tonight?" She sighed sharply, tossing her phone to the nightstand. "You always want to fix everything with sex, but you don't even try. You're lazy in bed, Liam. You just lie there like you're doing me a favor." The words hit him like a slap, sharp, unprovoked, and utterly humiliating. He blinked slowly, stunned into silence. His hand dropped back to his side. The warmth in his chest quickly turned into something cold and hollow. Jessica immediately realized what she'd said. There was a flicker of regret in her voice, but she didn't apologize. She shifted under the blanket, facing away from him again. Liam sat upright, his jaw clenched. "Is that really how you see me?" he asked quietly. She didn't respond. "Okay," he whispered after a long pause. His voice was calm, too calm, like something had snapped inside him. He stood up, walked slowly to the hallway closet, and pulled out a spare blanket and pillow. Without saying another word, he walked downstairs and lay on the living room couch. As he stared at the ceiling in the dim light of the TV glow, the sting of her words echoed in his mind, not just the insult, but the indifference, no apology, no care. Outside, the wind rustled against the windows. Inside, silence stretched between them like a canyon. He didn't sleep much that night, not because of the couch, but because a part of him, something vital, had gone numb. And he knew things wouldn't go back to the way they were. Not this time. They were once inseparable. Liam and Jessica, college sweethearts who met in an art class. He painted abstract landscapes. She sketched human faces with impossible emotion. Back then, love was simple. Handwritten notes, shared ramen noodles, sleeping on a mattress on the floor and thinking it was paradise. Their wedding was small but beautiful. They had nothing, but they had each other. Liam remembered her laughter echoing through their first apartment, her hand always reaching for his, their midnight dance sessions in the kitchen while pasta boiled on the stove. She used to say, "No matter how hard life gets, promise me we'll never forget this kind of silly love." But life did get hard. The pressure began subtly. Liam took a full-time job straight out of college, while Jessica tried to finish her degree. When she got pregnant, everything changed. The art supplies were packed away. Bills replaced dreams. Diapers, doctor visits, grocery lists. It all built up like layers of dust on their old life. Liam became consumed with being a provider. Long hours, double shifts, and freelancing on weekends. He told himself he was doing it for her, for their daughter, for the life they never had. But with each late night, he became more of a roommate than a husband. Jessica, once joyful and light, grew tired and brittle. Her sketches disappeared, her laughter faded. She took on most of the parenting, felt unseen, and began to critique, at first gently, then sharply. "You never listen. Why do I always have to handle everything? You're here, but you're never really here." Liam heard it all, but never knew how to respond. So he retreated, first emotionally, then physically. He stopped initiating conversations. He nodded instead of speaking. He began to walk on eggshells, always trying to avoid setting her off. The bedroom, once their refuge, became a silent battlefield. She turned away more often than not. He stopped reaching. They made love occasionally, but it felt like a performance, empty, transactional. Neither of them said it out loud, but the warmth was gone. In one flashback, Liam stood outside their door, listening to Jessica cry in the shower. He wanted to go in, wanted to hold her, but instead, he turned and walked away. He didn't know how to fix it anymore. He narrates in the present. It wasn't just what she said that night. It was everything she stopped saying long before that. The compliments, the good nights, the I love yous. She used to smile when I walked into a room. Now, she barely looked up, and I stopped fighting to be seen. He realized the pain didn't begin with her insult. It began with years of small hurts, tiny, unspoken cuts that added up until they both bled dry. Their marriage didn't break in one night. It eroded, quietly, invisibly, until one sentence finally exposed the hollow silence they'd been sleeping beside for years. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow over a kitchen that felt colder than ever. Liam stood at the stove, flipping pancakes in silence. The aroma of butter and batter filled the room, but there was no comfort in it today. He hadn't slept. His eyes were red, not from tears, but from the weight of realization. Jessica entered the room wearing her robe, her hair pulled back carelessly. She paused at the sight of him cooking, uncertain. Usually this meant he was trying to make peace. Usually it ended with an apology and silence swallowing the discomfort. But this time was different. He placed a plate on the table, poured her a cup of coffee without a word, and sat down across from her. He didn't eat. Jessica cleared her throat. Liam, about last night. He looked at her, calm, steady, distant. No need to explain. You were honest, and I think I needed to hear it. She blinked. I didn't mean to. He cut her off gently. I think I need some time away, not out of anger, but because I finally heard you. Jessica stared at him. She was used to seeing him get defensive or hurt. But this version of Liam, serene, resolved, made her chest tighten. You're just going to walk away, she whispered. No, he said, standing. I'm going to take space. There's a difference. He walked upstairs, packed a single suitcase with quiet efficiency, and returned to the kitchen as if leaving for a short trip. Jessica followed him to the door. So that's it? You're leaving? Her voice cracked. He turned to face her. For now, I don't know what's ahead, but I know I can't pretend anymore. I've spent too long trying to make it work without knowing if I was even wanted. Jessica reached out, her hand trembling, but he stepped back. He offered a sad, small smile. I'm not angry, Jess. I'm just tired. And with that, he walked out. He drove straight to his brother Nathan's apartment. Nathan, a few years younger and forever the laid-back type, opened the door in boxers and raised an eyebrow. Liam simply said, I need to stay here for a while. Nathan, no questions asked, nodded and gestured him inside. Back at home, Jessica sat at the table, staring at the untouched pancakes. Her hands gripped the coffee mug like it might anchor her. She called her best friend later that afternoon. He left, she said, voice thin. What? For good? I don't know, Jessica whispered. He didn't yell, didn't beg, just left, calm, like he was already gone inside. Her friend asked gently, Do you think he'll come back? Jessica hesitated, then replied almost to herself. He always folds, but this time, he looked done. She sat in silence after the call, the quietness of the house suddenly deafening. For the first time in years, she wondered if her words, spoken in anger, had finally broken something that wouldn't mend. Liam woke up in his brother Nathan's spare room, just a mattress on the floor and a lamp with a broken shade. But for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel suffocated. The air felt cleaner, the silence more bearable. He didn't have to tiptoe. He didn't have to measure his words. He didn't have to try. That morning, he made himself black coffee and sat on the balcony, watching the sun rise through the haze of the city. For once, he wasn't checking emails or responding to messages. He just sat, alone with his thoughts. And that, surprisingly, felt okay. Over the next few days, Liam started piecing himself back together, not to prove anything to Jessica, but for the man he had forgotten how to be. He joined a gym near Nathan's apartment. The first few workouts were brutal. His muscles ached. He was winded after just 10 minutes on the treadmill, but he showed up every day. It became more than exercise. It became a way of saying, I'm still here. At Nathan's gentle urging, he also began seeing a therapist, Dr. Alina Ward, a soft-spoken but sharp-eyed woman who didn't let him get away with half-truths. In their first session, Liam sat across from her with arms crossed. She said I was lazy, in bed. I don't even think it was about that. It was something deeper, but it broke something. Dr. Ward nodded. That wasn't the first time you felt invisible, was it? Liam looked down, the knot in his throat tightening. No, I guess it's been years. She stopped seeing me, and I stopped trying to be seen. As the sessions continued, Liam began unpacking more than just the insult. He talked about the quiet loneliness of being a man expected to endure without expression, about how his efforts to provide were never acknowledged, about how criticism had replaced affection, and how, somewhere along the way, he started to believe he deserved it. Dr. Ward's words stuck with him. You weren't lazy, you were unloved, and you stopped loving yourself. That line echoed in his head for days. He picked up an old sketch pad from a box he'd left at Nathan's years ago. His hands trembled as he held the pencil, like greeting an old friend. That night, he drew for hours. A face, a tree, an abstract swirl of tangled emotions. It didn't matter what came out. It mattered that he was expressing again. He started journaling too, raw, unfiltered entries, sometimes angry, sometimes numb, sometimes painfully honest. Today I realized I haven't looked in a mirror and liked who I saw in years. I miss her, but I also miss me more. Nathan noticed the change. You're standing straighter, he commented one evening. You've got that Liam face again, the artist one. Liam smiled. It felt strange, but real. He wasn't healed, not fully, but he was beginning to understand something crucial. His worth wasn't measured by how much he could tolerate, or how much he could fix, or how well he performed in any room, including the bedroom. He began building a man who didn't need to be needed just to feel valuable. And somewhere between the iron bars at the gym, the pages of his sketchpad, and the silence of therapy, Liam found the first seeds of something he hadn't felt in years. Self-respect. Not the kind that demands admiration from others, the kind that whispers, you matter, even when no one claps for you. The house felt larger without him, quieter, colder, like it had lost something invisible but essential. Jessica sat alone at the dinner table, pushing a fork through untouched pasta, the chair across from her hauntingly empty. The silence that once felt like power now settled on her shoulders like guilt. Every room echoed with his absence. His shoes were gone from the hallway. His toothbrush no longer sat next to hers. The blankets on his side of the bed remained untouched. It wasn't just that Liam had left. It was the way he left. Calm, final, no drama, no begging. And somehow, that hurt more than shouting ever could. She replayed that night over and over in her mind. The way his face fell when she called him lazy. How he didn't argue, didn't accuse, just quietly walked away. She cringed every time the memory surfaced. Her friends began to notice. One asked casually at lunch, "Is Liam travelling for work again?" Jessica forced a smile and nodded. Another friend probed further. "You two okay?" And she lied. Again. "Just taking space," she'd said. But even her voice sounded hollow. Days passed, and the questions only grew more difficult to deflect, especially from their daughter Ava. It was late one evening when Ava, barely 17, came into the living room, holding a photo of their family from 5 years ago, smiling, carefree, whole. "Did Dad leave because you made him feel small?" Jessica froze. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. "I heard you fighting that night," Ava said softly, "and I've seen how you've talked to him for a long time." Jessica swallowed, her throat dry. "It's more complicated than that." Ava didn't argue. She just gave her a look, the kind that cuts deeper than words, and walked away. Jessica sat in that silence long after Ava had gone to bed, and for the first time in years, she pulled out a blank notebook and began to write. She wrote angrily at first, blaming work, stress, motherhood. But as the pen moved, the anger gave way to something quieter, something far more honest. She admitted she had been bitter for years, that she resented Liam not for who he was, but for how easily he seemed to keep going while she felt stuck. That she took his silence as indifference instead of exhaustion. That his touch felt empty because she had emptied herself first. She wrote, "It wasn't about sex. It wasn't even about Liam. It was about me. The parts of me I never dealt with. And instead of facing them, I projected them onto him. I called him lazy, but the truth is, I was the one who had stopped trying long ago." Later that night, restless and searching for something, anything, she opened the old wooden box where Liam kept little mementos. Ticket stubs, love notes, a dried flower from their honeymoon. Tucked between 2 cards was a folded piece of paper in his handwriting. It was a note he'd written her years ago, one she had forgotten. It read, "I love you, even when I don't know how to say it, even when I feel like I've failed. You are my home." Jessica held the note to her chest and began to cry. Not just tears of regret, but of clarity. She had mistaken his silence for weakness. She had mistaken his patience for passivity. And worst of all, she had mistaken his love for convenience. Now she was beginning to see, too late, perhaps, that he had been holding them together in quiet ways she never bothered to notice. And he was gone. Because she finally gave him a reason to stop trying. The gallery was small but warm, tucked between a used bookstore and a coffee shop downtown. White walls carried splashes of colour, Liam's paintings. Each one reflected pieces of him. A quiet storm, a yearning shadow, a burst of light hidden in the corner of a canvas. It wasn't about perfection. It was about truth. He hadn't planned on showing them. It was Nathan who encouraged him, who pitched the idea to a friend who managed the gallery. Just one night, he'd said, "You owe it to yourself to be seen." And now here he was, nervous, heart racing, hands tucked into his jacket pockets as people wandered the space, tilting their heads and pausing thoughtfully before his work. Maya arrived about an hour in, Nathan's friend, a photographer with wild curls and a gentle laugh. She walked straight to a painting titled "Still I Stayed," a dark, stormy canvas with a single golden streak slicing through the middle. "This one hurts," she said softly, eyes still on the canvas. Liam chuckled awkwardly. "Good. That means it's honest." She turned to him, smiling. "It's more than honest. It's brave." He nodded, not knowing what to say. For the first time in a long while, someone was looking at him, and not for what he could do or fix, but for what he expressed. And though he wasn't searching for romance, something in him stirred, not desire, but the quiet relief of being seen. Later that week, he attended his usual support group. The circle was filled with men who rarely had permission to be soft. Husbands, fathers, sons. This week, it was his turn to speak. I used to think being a man meant being strong enough to take anything, Liam said, his voice steady. I thought I was doing the right thing by staying quiet, enduring, keeping the peace. But now I know. Strength isn't how much you can hold in. It's knowing when to walk away and still wish someone well. The room was silent for a moment. Then came the clapping, gentle at first, then stronger. A few men nodded with tears in their eyes. It wasn't just about Liam. It was about all of them. Afterward, he stayed behind, helping stack chairs. One of the newer members, a man in his 50s, came up and said, "I wish I had your courage 20 years ago. Maybe I'd still know who I am." Liam didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded and placed a hand on the man's shoulder. That night, as he scrolled through his messages, a notification popped up. His art show had been tagged on Instagram. A photo of him standing beside "Still, I Stayed" had gone semi-viral in a small arts community. The caption read, "Real men feel, real men heal. Powerful debut from Liam W." What he didn't know was that Jessica had seen it too. She stared at the screen from her couch, heart thudding. The painting struck her like a punch because she recognized the storm. She remembered the golden streak. He had once described her that way. "You're the light in my darkest places." But now that light had been painted into something distant, something finished. And for the first time, she felt what he must have felt for years, unseen, and now, possibly, unwanted. It was close to midnight when Liam's phone rang. He stared at the screen, hesitating. Jessica's name pulsed softly in the dim light of his room. 3 weeks had passed since he walked out. 3 weeks of silence, distance, rediscovery. He debated letting it ring, but something told him to answer. He picked up, voice quiet. "Hello?" On the other end, Jessica exhaled shakily. "Liam." The sound of her voice sent a rush of emotions through him. Familiar, painful, tender, guarded. She paused, then continued. "I said something awful to you. And I hate that it took you leaving for me to realize how deep I'd been hurting you." He didn't respond right away. He leaned against the wall, staring at the abstract painting he'd finished earlier that night, a swirl of dark and gold. His silence invited her to keep going. "I keep thinking about how calm you were when you left," she said. That's what broke me, Liam. You didn't fight. You didn't yell. You just walked away, like you had nothing left to defend." He closed his eyes. That was exactly how it felt. "I ask myself," she went on, "how many times you bit your tongue, how many times I made you feel small while convincing myself I was the one being forgotten." The weight in her voice trembled. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I was hurting, but I used you as a place to dump my pain, and that's not love." She took a deep breath. "I want you to come home, not because I'm lonely, but because I finally see what I did, what we did." Liam's throat tightened. He pressed his fingers to his eyes. "I don't hate you, Jess," he said quietly, "but I don't know if I can trust you again." There was a long silence. That silence screamed louder than anything you ever said. "You were never lazy, Liam. You were tired. You were trying to hold up a love that I kept withdrawing from, like it owed me something. I broke something in you with 7 careless words. I know healing takes more than silence. It takes time. It takes consistency. It takes repentance. Lived, not spoken. So here's my truth. I'm willing to wait as long as it takes, not for you to forgive me, but for you to feel whole again, whether that's beside me or beyond me. I'm not writing this letter to ask you to come back. I'm writing it so you know I finally see you, all of you. You were never lazy. You were surviving me, and somehow still loving me through it." Liam stared at the last line for a long time. the ink slightly smudged where her pen must have hesitated, or maybe where a tear had fallen. The paper trembled in his hands. And then, without warning, the tears came. Not violent, not loud, just steady. Tears of grief. For the years he spent questioning his worth. Tears of grace. For the moment someone finally acknowledged the quiet war he'd been fighting. He pressed the letter gently to his chest. His eyes lifted to the canopy of orange leaves above him. Sunlight pierced through in soft rays. The wind brushed his skin like a whisper. He didn't know what he would do next. He didn't know if he would call her, go back, rebuild. But for the first time in a long time, he felt understood, not just by her, but by himself. He folded the letter with care, slid it into his coat pocket, and stood. As he walked to his car, the leaves crunching under his boots, he didn't look back. He didn't need to, because healing had already begun, not with a dramatic reunion, not with promises, but with a sentence that rewrote everything. You were never lazy. You were surviving me. The screen fades. Final silence. A man standing tall, not because he was forgiven, but because he finally forgave himself.